On the profile interview segment this week, I'll be speaking with Comrade Hassan Sunmonu. He tells me some of his experience serving as the #1 worker of Nigeria in 1978. He also spoke about his alma mater, the Yaba College of Technology, and its drive towards establishing the Hassan Sunmonu Center for Leadership and Governance. How does it feel for the creation of the Hassan Sunmonu Center for Leadership and Governance?
I consider it a great honor. I'm grateful to the Almighty Allah that it is during my lifetime and not after my demise. So that's one of the things I'm grateful for. Secondly, it's also the fact that, thanks also to my trade union mentor, the late Comrade Wahab Goodluck, who taught me the ABC of trade unionism. We followed his footsteps, and I think it has been very rewarding for me to follow the footsteps of giants like the late Comrade Wahab Goodluck, who taught me trade unionism and whose values I also imbibed, which has also guided me in all my trade union work for over 50 years.
Okay, it's not just the establishment of a leadership and governance center, it's also the commencement of a lecture series in your honor. This year that this conversation started, the title of the lecture series is Democracy and the Dynamics of Development in Africa. Can you tell us why it's important for us to have such conversation at this particular point in time?
Well, there are a lot of things wrong with our democracies in Africa. Not only in Nigeria, but also in other African countries. Democracy has been hijacked by the elected few to the detriment of the welfare of the majority of the people who should actually enjoy the fruits of democracy. That's why the center is germane, the lecture itself, the title of the lecture is also germane to the problem, not only in Nigeria, but all over Africa. Like the lecturer, Professor Otoyin Falola, said in his lecture, he cited the cases of Cameroon, cited the case of Uganda, where leaders have been, have been elected and re-elected for over 40 years, and whose families, have taken over their personalized governance in their countries. So it's a failure of democracy. Can you call that democracy in Cameroon? Can you call it democracy in Uganda, where leaders are, perpetuating themselves in office? That's the, democracy of a family by a family in the interest of the family. That's what in the interest of the people. So that's why, before Nigeria also slides into such, it has to be a wake-up call for all of us, particularly for the youth, so that this democracy will not be hijacked to make it a democracy of the rich, for the rich, by the rich, in the interest of the rich.
During the lecture, some recommendations were made, particularly the need, the urgency for institutional and moral reform. Do you want to expatiate on that?
Well, when we were in the secondary schools in those days, in the early 60s, there was a religious form of this they call moral rearmament. You remember that, which book came out, some group came up with for moral rearmament of the individual to benefit the society. We need moral reform so that leadership will be seen as service to the people, not as personal aggrandizement for the individual and his or her immediate family. That's what leadership has been in most African countries today.
Service to the people. Can you bring us up to speed with some of the achievements? One of them is the institutionalization of the national minimum wage. I don't know if you'd like to share one or two things about that struggle then, juxtaposing it with some of the demands that some of the current trade unionists are still faced with?
Well, I remember in 1981, in my 6 years term, 2 terms as president of the Nigerian Labour Congress, as the pioneer president, we went on strike only once. And that is on May 11th and 12th, 1981, for minimum wage, for national minimum wage, for May Day. The May Day we are celebrating today as a public holiday was part of our demands, you know.
Charter of demands.
As part of our, you know, it's part of the demand that we won, you know, as a struggle. A lot of people don't remember today that May Day did not just come on a platter of gold as a public holiday. It was a struggle. It was part of what, you know, we were even getting transport allowance in addition to the minimum wage. We got transport allowance, you know, housing allowance to make the 125 minimum wage to reach 150. And that 150 naira that time is worth more than the 70,000 today. And then see, this government of President Tinubu is trying, but we are not happy that he has put everything on the plate of the IMF World Bank. That I was telling the secretary to the government, Senator, what's his name? Akume, on May Day this year in Abuja. They should mention one country that IMF World Bank praises that has ever succeeded in their socio-economic policy anywhere in Africa, anywhere in the third world. Look, they were the bank borrowing and lending money to Nigeria. Abi? They are now the ones saying that that money they are lending is not well spent by the government. That's not reaching down to the people. You get the point now? They know what is happening. We rejected the social adjustment program of the IMF World Bank since the 80s, not only in Nigeria, but throughout Africa. Why should they now be the darling, the baby we buried, the Obanje baby we buried in the early 80s, is now the newborn baby our government is now celebrating? We're not happy with that. Don't you have economists and development economists, Nigerians, who can give our own government better ideas on how to get Nigeria developed? I was at the OAU Special Summit on Africa's Debt in October 1987 in Addis Ababa, when African leaders were discussing Africa's debt and debt servicing. And I remember what the late Thomas Sankara of Burkina Faso said this, our so-called development partners, they have been gambling with us and our economy, and they have been winning. But this time around, the debt they have put on our listing, they are unpayable. So they have now lost their listing. So when you gamble, when you win some, you have to lose some. And I remember the observation of President Kenneth Kaunda, who was chairing that meeting that day. He said, hey, young man, I admire your courage, but I'm afraid of you. I'm afraid for you. That very month, Sankara was killed. Look, we have been saying that why should we be afraid of people and then offend God? Our people, the welfare of Nigerian people should be the raison d'etre of our leaders and our government.
Not from external voice.
Not what IMF World Bank dictates. They don't wish us well. Two, we are spending too much money on politics and paying salaries of political people and politicians to the detriment of development of the people.
So what will be your recommendations going forward?
My recommendation going forward is that first, we should stop any loan from IMF and World Bank. Two, any money that we borrow must be used for projects that will bring in money for repayment and for development, that will bring in jobs to the teeming population, that will improve agriculture. They should sit down with us and talk. they should not sit down only with their own political cronies. They are not telling them the truth. Those who tell them the truth, they are running away from those who tell them the truth. And IMF World Bank structure, you know what you call it in Yoruba? Eh? You know what you call it in Yoruba? Olowo ko otoshi mefa, otoshi di meje. One rich man plus 6 poor people equal to 7 poor people. And we cannot allow Nigeria to be controlled by a few people, because in the struggle we didn't see them. When the people who are being killed in the coal mine, when the people are being murdered on the street for protesting, for asking for independence, they are nowhere to be found. And now we got independence, they want to corner all the wealth of Nigeria. We cannot accept that. Are they making use of people, Nigerian economics and so on, to develop Nigeria's own indigenous developmental projects? They are waiting for IMF and this thing. IMF World Bank. How can a slave master want freedom for a slave? We have become their economic slaves. We should liberate ourselves. This is what we are saying.
I know that you have experience in Pan-Africanism.
Yeah.
If you want to talk about locally right now as we speak, we are getting to that age whereby it's looking like as if labor is fading away. Unionism is dwindling. We have employers of labor that does not want workers' representation anymore. I know that it took people like you and some other labor leaders to fight that, and for us to for the
millions of Dangote cannot destroy unionism in this country. Quote me. A million Dangote cannot destroy unionism in this country, because unionism came before they were born, and it's going to stay. Because look, our Nigerian constitution guarantees freedom of association, freedom of religion. The workers have a right to belong to any union of their choice. No employer has any right to deny any Nigerian worker the right to belong to a union. They say he has established, yes, I admire him, he has established industry and so on, but he has no right to deny Dangote workers from belonging to a union.
And what would be your message to even the labor leaders themselves in terms of engagement, in terms of renewing the commitment of the need for workers to continue to collaborate and associate?
Look, the best management are management that cooperates with its workers to see the advancement of the organization, the company, or whatever. But an employer that is hostile to his own workers is doing so at his own detriment, to the detriment of the company itself. The Nigerian Constitution guarantees the right of association, the right to belong to any religion or to any organization of your choice. It's guaranteed in the Constitution. How can anybody violate the right of any Nigerian to belong to a union because you establish a company? No, it's not right. They are not a good thing in establishing some of this thing, his petroleum thing, his refinery. We compliment him for that. How can you say workers should not belong to any union of their choice? How can I say you should not be a Christian if you want to be? I should not be a Hindu if you want to be. I should not be a Muslim if you want to be. You have no right to do that. The Constitution guarantees that. This is what we are saying. And you know, when people become too rich, they think they also have power of life and death over their workers. They have powers of life and death over the... They don't have. They don't have. We struggled for independence for this country. How many workers died before this country got independent? Where were they? When the workers were facing the bullets of the colonial masters, where were they? So Obedele to Adamumbula. Now that everything they now come. No, this country belongs to Nigerians, and Nigerians must be the laws of what God has given to them as country and all its resources.
On a final note for this interview, what would be your expectations for the Hassan Sunmonu Center for Leadership and Governance?
My expectations will be that the center will continue to train present and future leaders at all levels and to imbibe the character for which this center has been set up. One, character of honesty, service, hard work, patriotism, and visionary leadership.
So would there be any other expectations in terms of maybe certification, in terms of...
Of course, there will be research and development. Don't you see our people? The professors are here. Look, when I was president of NSC for 6 years, we didn't allow any foreign country to come and give lecture here for workers. We had our universities that time. We had our NECA, where we used to invite NECA people to come and give lectures at workers. This thing. We have in-house expertise that we are making use of for 6 years. We say, look, if you want to help our workers open the doors of your trade union colleges in your country, we train over 2,000 cadres abroad. A lot of them are still in the leadership of the NLC today. A lot of them, up to today. But when they were coming before to come and organize lecture, they used to bribe to say, overthrow this, do this, this man is too radical, overthrow him. That's why we banned them that time. Education must continue at all levels. Members and leaders must have continuous education to have improvement in their, in their delivery, at their workplaces, and as contributions as citizens to the economy of our country. Look, there is hardly any state in Nigeria that does not have 1 or 2 strategic minerals. Where are the minerals? Who are the people exploiting them? Bandits are mining gold. So many days for the thief, 1 day for the owner. There is no reason why Nigeria should be poor, because the Almighty God has endowed this country with human and natural resources just because of the greed of leaders. We have a say at home, nobody forbids you from eating your in-laws' house. But when you eat 6 people's food at a time in your in-laws' house, that becomes too much.
The expectation, your wish for an average Nigerian worker?
My wish for an average Nigerian person, not even worker, is that this country, Nigeria, is rich enough to have free education at all levels for all Nigerians. This country is rich enough intellectually, to overtake the so-called advanced countries that we are copying, to overtake them in decades. But the instruments we have for overtaking them, our own myopic leaders are destroying education. We are going to stay in this country to build this country. We are not going to allow the selfishness, the greed, myopia of our leaders to dampen our enthusiasm to develop this country.
Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah.
And that's all we can take on today's edition of the program. Join us next week for a fresh edition of the show. I am Sharon Ijason. Thanks for watching, and remember that labor creates wealth.